Wait.
Till I come back to your side, we'll forget the tears we cried.
This is indeed a disturbing universe.
Hello, greetings and welcome. Welcome to the Stereo 999 YouTube channel. I am your host, the artist formerly known as Stereo Steve. And it's another week, another video. And this week I'm going to kind of get back to my usual formula. I'm going to talk about some records that I've gotten in the past month. And there's going to be a little bit of a theme. There's going to be a theme of expectations about music changing the way you react to music. There's one record I'm going to talk about in the second half that a lot of people don't like, and it really has nothing to do with the music itself, but just the high expectations. But yeah. So I got some records, I got some new records, and I got some old records, and I think in the first half of this video I'm going to talk about the new records, and in the second half I'm going to talk about the old records, and it's going to be just one of them videos where some guy's talking about records, and you're watching it and trying to imagine what the music sounds like in your mind. So here we go. Hey Steve! Didn't you make a New Year's resolution that you weren't going to buy any more albums? Stop! 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 Stop!
Man, he must be having a bad trip.
Through Hell by CA Quintet, and I've been a fan of this album since the early 90s when I heard the song Cold Spider on a compilation, and I ordered the CD reissue from Sundays to this album that just came out. There was a CD issue, bunch of bonus tracks. There was a double vinyl version that had the bonus tracks on the second disc, but this is kind of bare bones. It's just the album, which is fine because the album itself has a different vibe than anything else this band ever recorded. I mean, you look at the cover, you listen to the music, check out this beautiful red vinyl, and I don't know, people expect, some people expect this to be more proto-metal with a title like Trip Through Hell, but this is like a Midwestern 60s garage band that decided they needed to try some of this LSD stuff everybody's been talking about, and they had bad trips all around and made this record. It's got the 60s garage instrumentation, but it's also got some female vocals and trumpets, and it kind of sounds like monster movie background music, like the title track. And there are parts where the guitars come in and it's just complete chaos. Like even in the party anthem underground music, the guitars just go insane on this record. And I love this album, and I'm like, I should have a vinyl copy of it and not just the compact disc. This is Sonancy by Loop. And if you remember Loop from the early 90s, they were English stoner psychedelic rock. Loop was not just a clever name, because a lot of their songs were just like the same riff over and over again, and far from being boring, it was like mesmerizing and hypnotic. And this album continues in the style of classic Loop. Some of the tracks with vocals are a little more new wavy sounding, but it's still got the Loop format of the repetition. The hype sticker says, "First studio album since Gilded Eternity." And This came out in 2021. It's MVB, My Bloody Valentine, and it's the long-awaited My Bloody Valentine album. Again, it didn't come out until like 2013, I think, and they did a tour, and at the time I thought I would like this more if I didn't have to wait so long for it. But now, with another 10 years gone by, it fits into the Bloody Valentine canon just fine. Sounds like them. It's a nice record. And yeah. Okay. Now, this record is kind of, I don't know, kind of an Achilles heel in a way. This band is called Circus Underwater, and it's came out in like mid-80s, maybe 1984 originally, just an indie produced record. And I got a copy of this back then for free because I was, volunteering with radio stations, and it was in a stack of promo stuff that just kind of fell in my lap. And I had it, I listened to it back then. I remember I was kind of baffled by it because it didn't sound like anything that was happening at the time. It didn't really sound new wave or punk. It sounded, kind of new agey to my ears back then. I thought the title track was interesting because it's not really the title track. It's called The Surface of the Water, but it sounds like they're saying Circus Underwater. So I had it for a while and I traded it. And then there were a couple times where I saw it in record stores and it was a little more than I wanted to pay because, I got it for free and I didn't want to feel like a chump. And then I looked it up online, and it's the original copy of this is like a $200 record now, and I totally blew it. And that's the bad news. The good news is that it's been reissued. I just bought this reissue. It's been reissued as a double album with a second disc of unreleased tracks that are just really nice and spacey. And, listening to it now, I can hear the prog and space rock influences, and it makes more sense to my ears. Should I have kept my original copy? Yes. Would I have bought this reissue? Probably not. Seek out this obscure bit of privately pressed spacey synth prog from the 80s. It's actually pissing me off how good this is. This next one was a blind buy. It was cheap and it was sealed, and the hype sticker made it sound interesting. This was released in 2015 on a label called Medical Records. This band is called Kitty. Kitty. And pretty hard to Google because there were a lot of bands and artists who go by the name of Kitty. They have that kind of 90s sound that I like, where they're kind of crossing the line between indie rock and shoegaze, but then adding more and more electronics into it. Maybe, they compare it to Seafeel and Flying Saucer Attack on the hype sticker. So I did a little research. The band really was from the 90s, from Austin, Texas, and they played around and they recorded a bunch of stuff, but they never put it out on a record until 2015 when it got released. Nice blue vinyl. Kitty. Epic rap battle. Pavarotti versus Mr. Gopher!
I'm Mr. Gopher. Pavarotti, you ain't so hip, you're just snotty.
Oh, Mr. Gopher, I cooked a meatball out of you.
Hey, Pavarotti, you've been eating too much stew.
My number one is a really obscure album, but in the prog world, it's legendary for its awfulness. So I'm going to read you the musicians that perform on this album. John Anderson. You probably heard of a few of these guys. You got John Anderson, Rick Wakeman, Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Robert Fripp. You got three guys from Van de Graaff. You got Peter Hamill, Nick Potter, Guy Evans, Davy Johnstone from Elton John's band, right? Linda Hoyle from Affinity. You got Dave Campanetti and Steve Gould from Rarebird. Jane Ralph, the original singer from the original Renaissance, and Rod Clemens from Lindisfarne. So you got that lineup, and you think that it's got to be the greatest progressive rock album of all time. Like how could it not be? Instead, it's this album put together by a British folk singer named Colin Scott. and it sucks in the worst way possible. So, I mean, his real name was Colin Thistlethwaite, and that's the most interesting thing about the album. It's just this boring folk sort of pop music with anonymous contributions from this all-star cast. Yeah, did I
Colin Scott. If you're familiar with this record, or if you learned about this record the way I learned about it, you will know that this is a record that will forever be cursed by expectations because of the people who play on this record in his backup band. But Colin Scott is a English folk rock guy. I think he just made this one record in 1971. And it's, if you like English folk rock of the kind of mellow, introspective, a little bit melancholy type, this is a good record. This is a good record. If you like Cat Stevens, if you like any kind of singer-songwriter, you know, just kind of introspective, early 70s kind of stuff, you'll like this record. But the thing about this record is that it has a stellar cast of players on it. Everyone from John Anderson to Robert Fripp to Peter Hamill appears on this record in the backup band. But it's not a prog rock record. It's a folk record. And a lot of people, I don't know, this guy, I was watching Sea of Tranquility, and this one guy just went on this total tirade against this record and how it's an abomination and how it's just ripping off progressive rock fans with cheesy music. And I don't know. He calls it pop music, but the songs are more sad. It's not like cheesy pop music.
Did I jump over the fact that Fripp is even playing on it? I mean, it's like somebody has to take this album out behind the barn and shoot it. I mean, it just put it out of its misery, because it's been haunting the prog universe since it came out in the early 70s. It's just a terrible, terrible record.
If you're a professional musician or want to sound like one, no, seriously, if you were a professional musician, and even now, if you're a professional musician, you get hired to play on a session. You know, Robert Fripp himself said, the musician serves the music and not vice versa. And, you know, this guy wrote these songs, and all these prog rock superstars, being professional musicians, just, you know, kept it in the pocket, made his record sound good, you know. Another example, if you're familiar with this band, The Free Design, I mean, you might know their song Kites Are Fun, kind of 60s sunshine pop, and then by the early 70s, they were sounding more like the Carpenters. And this is probably the best of, this is One by One by The Free Design. This is probably my favorite of the albums they made that sound like the Carpenters. And you know who plays drums on this record? Billy Cobham. Does it sound like Mahavishnu Orchestra? No. Does he give you any bump, bump? No. He, you know, he was paid to make this record sound good, and that's what he did. Anyway, so yeah, that's just something you got to do with music sometimes, you know. Sometimes you're not going to like something if you come into it with a lot of baggage of expectations. So anyway, I'm going to go from a record that was less prog sounding than people expected to a record that was way more prog sounding than I expected. This is Point of No Return by Kansas. And this was a case of the hit song on the album being mellow, but the rest of the album actually going pretty hard. Because, of course, the hit song on this album is Dust in the Wind, but the song structures are pretty complex. There's some kind of Keith Emerson-ish organ playing on it. And yeah, it's legit prog rock here. Kansas, boop, boop, Kansas, do, 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 do. Okay, back to English folk rock, Steeleye Span. Steeleye Span, they're kind of in the Fairport Convention universe. And this was one of their 70s albums that got a little more rockish than their earlier stuff. It's got Blackjack Davy that I think has been sampled a few times. Hard Times in Old England. This is kind of a goofy album cover.
Well, so what we have is an anamorphic image. So you'll notice the face is stretched out. But if you return the thing, and let's see, this design employs a device known as anamorphic projection. And do you have it fully framed?
Yes.
All right, so. You tell me when it starts to look okay.
Like about now. Yeah, I see it. Okay, that's cool. Again, this is one somebody played for me back in the 80s, and I wasn't 100% feeling it, but it makes more sense to me listening to it now. Okay. Like I said, you know, I was always on Team Mahavishnu Orchestra, so I didn't really pay that much attention to Return to Forever. I thought they got kind of slick later on with their albums on Columbia. But the Return to Forever albums on the Polydor label, they go pretty hard. They got some ripping solos and good stuff. So Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. And if that's an L. Ron Hubbard reference, I don't want to know. Bill Connors killing it on guitar. Stanley Clarke, listed as Stan Clark. Yeah, this is some 1973 goodness here. All right. Okay, here's a band from the early 80s that's sadly been forgotten. They were called the Inmates, and I think they were just a couple years ahead of the 80s garage rock revival. They kind of have an early Stones kind of sound, and you know, they do like Stop It Baby and Some Kind of Wonderful and Talk Talk by the Music Machine. This is their second album. They were kind of a one-hit wonder. Their hit was a cover of the Standells' Dirty Water on their first album. But you don't see their second album too often, and I saw it, and I got it, and it's good. Okay, another 60s band that I just did not pay that much attention to, and then I saw this record. I heard Are You Ready, the title track. This band is called Pacific Gas and Electric. And again, what are they trying to tell us with this album cover? I don't know, Dr. Freud, but I heard Are You Ready on like a K-Tel album, and it kind of had that where they were kind of bringing in gospel music and rock and making kind of an anthem. But this is actually pretty decent psychedelic cheap heat. And it's got this song, Love, 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 which you might know by a band called Wool. But I wanted that song and that Wool record you never find. And this record I found. Well, if you've made it this far, we're just about getting to the end of the video. Hope you liked it. Hope you watched it. You know, you can like and subscribe and all that stuff. If you're new here, I appreciate it. And, you know, maybe watch some of my other videos because, you know, they might be better than this. And leave me a comment. Let me know what's on your mind. Let me know if this video made you think of anything. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you next time I see you. Peace. Stop. 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 I've seen people flex about, oh, I don't do any editing. I just ramble on and on because makes my videos more pure. But no, editing is where the fun is. Ha ha!